My name is Nicole. Welcome to Faith, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get our service started here in just a moment with our music team coming out to lead us in a few songs. The lyrics will be on the screen, so you can feel free to sing along. After that, one of our pastors will come out and give an encouraging message from God's Word. We hope it will be a blessing to you. But before we get started, we have just a few quick announcements, so let's see what's coming up next.
Do you have questions about Faith Baptist Church? Are you interested in what it means to be a member here at Faith? Contact anyone on our pastoral staff or email info@includefaith.org to find out more information about our membership class. This is a 6-week one-on-one class where you will learn more about our church history, philosophy, and doctrine.
Mosaic class, it's progressive dinner time. Join us as we enjoy a 4-course meal with 4 families within our church. We will enjoy an amazing time of connection as we participate in a special scavenger hunt with prizes to win. This year, we will also feature a carpool option via the church van. Meet at the church at 4:45 p.m. on Saturday, March 7th for an on-time departure. Check in and RSVP with Pastor Jordan for more details.
Join us for the Pat Brandon Memorial Bake Auction and Donut Eating Contest on March 8th. This is going to be a high-paced, action-packed event that you won't want to miss. Feel the thrill of the bake auction before watching the greatest donut eating contest this church has ever seen, all while raising money for the Teen Summer Camp Fund.
Parents and students, summer camp is coming up and we're having our first meeting on Sunday, March 1st. This is an important meeting for all parents and kids interested in going to camp this summer. You will not want to miss this meeting as we will take the registration for camp as well as get all the important information into your hands that you need. Join us following the morning service in the teen room upstairs. Need more information? Contact Brother Derek. Again, thanks for joining us today. If after the service you find you have any questions, please visit guest services in the lobby. We're going to get started here in just a moment. Find your seat if you haven't already as we get started.
Well, good morning and welcome to Faith Baptist Church. We're so glad that you're here. If you're a guest here this morning at Faith Baptist Church, we just want to say from the leadership down to the congregation, thank you so much for joining us here this morning and spending part of your weekend here at our church celebrating the risen Christ. We only ask our guests to do one thing, and that is that they would fill out this connection card. This connection card is right there in the pew before you, and it just helps us to be able to get to know you, to be able to get connected with you. And so we just ask that if you're a guest, you fill out as much information as you're comfortable with so that we can better serve you here as a church and also as a staff. Also, for our guests, if this is your first time here, we have a special gift for you in the lobby. And so on your way out of the service this morning, please plan to pick that gift up. Well, let's go ahead and stand as we begin by singing praise to our God. We're going to sing this great hymn, Praise to the Lord the Almighty. And let's lift it up as we consider Jesus. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. Oh, my soul, praise Him, for He is your health and salvation. All you who hear, now to His temple draw near. Join me in glad adoration. He wondrously reigns, He shelters us, He's gently sustained. Praise to the Lord over all things, so wondrously reigning. Shelters you under His wings, oh so gently sustaining. Have you not seen how your desires have been granted in His wise ordaining? Praise to the Lord who with marvelous wisdom has made you, decked you with health and with loving and guided and stayed you. How often grief has He not brought you relief, spreading your wings for to shade you. Let's lift it up on this 4th verse. Praise to the Lord, oh let all that is in me adore Him. All that has life and breath come now with praises before Him. Let the Amen sound from His people again. Gladly forever adore Him. Let the Amen sound from His people again. Gladly forever adore Him. Take a moment, welcome one another here on the Lord's Day. As you make your way back to your seat, we'll continue giving praise and honor and glory to our majestic God. Let's sing all praise to Him, the God of light. All praise to Him, the God of light, who formed the mountains by His might. All praise to Him who names the stars that sing His fame in skies afar. All praise to Him who reigns in love, who guides the galaxies above, yet bends to hear our every prayer, and sovereign power and tender care. All praise to Him whose love is seen in Christ the Son, the servant King, who left behind His glorious throne to pay the ransom for His own. All praise to Him who humbly came to bear our sorrow, sin, and shame, who lived to die, who died to rise, the all-sufficient sacrifice. Let's lift it up on this last verse. All praise to Him whose power imparts the love of God within our hearts, the Spirit of all truth and peace, the fount of joy and holiness. To Father, Son, and Spirit now, our souls we lift, our wills we bow. To You, the triune God, we raise, with loving hearts our songs of praise. To Father, Son, and Spirit now, our souls we lift, our wills we bow. To You, the triune God, we raise, with loving hearts our songs of praise. Hear the heart of heaven beating, Jesus saves, Jesus saves, and the hush of mercy breathing, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Hear the hosts of angels sing, glory to the newborn King, and the sounding joy repeating, Jesus saves. See the humblest hearts adore Him, Jesus saves, Jesus saves, and the wisest bow before Him, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. See the sky alive with praise, melting darkness in its blaze. There is life forevermore in Jesus saves. Think about it, He will live. He will live, our sorrow sharing. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. He will die, our burden bearing. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. It is done, we'll shout the cross. Christ has paid redemption's cost, while the empty tombs declaring, Jesus saves. Freedom's calling, chains are falling, hope is dawning, bright and true. Day is breaking, night is quaking, God is making all things new. Freedom's calling, chains are falling, hope is dawning, bright and true. Day is breaking, night is quaking, God is making all things new. Jesus saves. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Are the saints who shout together, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Rising up so fast and strong, lifting up salvation's song. The redeemed will sing forever, and Jesus saves. rising up so vast and strong, lifting up salvation's song. The redeemed will sing forever. Jesus saves. The redeemed will sing forever. Jesus saves. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thy own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Lift it up. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. His faithfulness is great. You may be seated.
I've a home prepared where the saints abide, over in the glory land, and I long to be by my Savior's side, over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land I'll join the happy angels band, over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand, over in the glory land. I am on my way to those mansions fair, over in the glory land. there to sing God's praise and His glory share. Over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, I'll join the happy angel band. Over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Over in the glory land, what a joyful thought that my Lord I'll see. Over in the glory land, and the kindred say forever I'll be. Over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, I'll join the happy angel band. Over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, I'll join the happy angels band. Over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Over in the glory land.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mark chapter number 12. Mark chapter number 12. We welcome you again this morning. Thank you for being here. We trust that you've been encouraged today, whether it's your first time with us or you're here every week. We trust you've been encouraged by God's word, by people around you today, and in the songs that we've sung of great truth about our God. And today, as we celebrate Jesus being risen, it's our desire that you take a step forward in faith with Him. If you're here today and you don't know Jesus personally, you don't know what it is to have Him forgive you, save you, have a relationship with Him, before today, I just ask you, before you leave, just stop one of us and ask us a little bit about Him. We'd be glad to tell you about Him today and have that relationship clear in your mind before you leave here today. Mark chapter number 12. It'll be on the screen as well. Mark chapter number 12. We continue on in our series, Money Minus Jesus Equals Mistakes, just a 4-sermon series, wanting to learn from Jesus about how to utilize, how to understand, how to view one of the most practical and needed resources in our life. All of us have money. What should we do with it that would please Jesus and that we would learn to enjoy what the true meaning of money is? How can we utilize that which He has given us? And so we've been looking at that starting last week, money minus Jesus equals mistakes. And first mistake last week we saw was that we think money does not affect us spiritually. That we think that, I can have an outlook here that is not intertwined in a reflection or a manifestation of what's going on right in my heart. So we talked last week that if we're a follower of Jesus Christ, He said, don't go the wrong way and lay up treasures on earth. Don't seek all you can here and now and put all your effort, all your thoughts, your desire, the majority and bulk of your existence towards trying to get more here. Wrong. Use what you have here to make a difference here eternally in the lives of others and for the glory of God. So, mistake number 1 we saw was thinking that money doesn't affect us spiritually. We're going to look at a second mistake that Jesus warns us about here in Mark 12. So join me there. It's also on the screen. You can also Google Mark chapter number 12 to follow along with us. Mark chapter 12, verse 41. Note what's taking place. Jesus sat over against the treasury, and behold, how the people cast money into the treasury. And many that were rich cast in much. And there were a certain poor widow. She came and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And He called unto His disciples and said unto them, Verily, or truly, I I want you to catch this. This is important, disciples, followers of mine. Hear this lesson I'm about to tell you. He says, verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Here we have only a few brief verses that give us such great insight from Jesus on how he views our giving. If we claim to be his followers, he gives us a principle here today to incorporate and avoid a money mistake. If there's a mistake that Jesus is trying to help us learn about this week, it's this: that the mistake we often make, you see it on the screen, is that we want to seek to be reasonable with our money and our giving. Now let's stop for a second, because immediately you say, well, that's what we are. We're rational creatures by God's creation. He's given us the ability to discern, to reason, to understand. And I agree. It's wonderful. He's given us the ability in our cognitive minds to do those things, to make those choices. But understand this: the ability he's given us is then to fit within the framework of his desire and his economy, how he sees things spiritually and eternally, how we then operate here on earth in light of that. And so if there's a second mistake Jesus wants to warn or caution or move you and I away from, if we name the name of Jesus Christ, he says, okay, first mistake is thinking that money and doesn't reflect how you're doing spiritually or doesn't demonstrate what's going on in your heart or what your life is all about. That's first mistake. Second mistake is this: that when it comes to money and being generous, or when it comes to money and giving, or when it comes to money and what we do with it, we seek to be reasonable. We've started this series on purpose to try to help us gain God's perspective on just a few thoughts regarding our finances and what we use them for to make a difference for eternity. Now, somebody may step back and even this week say, I came to church last week, you talked about money. I came to church this week, you talked about money again. I've already given you a news flash. It's 4 sermons, so guess what? There's still 2 more to go, right? And so wanting to see Jesus' perspective to help us here. So we have it for these 4 weeks. And again, I'd say if we say, well, I hear you, but I don't want to come to church to hear about money, and I don't want to think about God thinking about money and him wanting me to be thoughtful about money. Well, I'll give you some more stats this week as well. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, 1 out of every 6 verses deals with how we deal with money or resources. 1 out of every 6. We'll say it again. Of the 29 parables Christ told, 16, possibly we could say even 17, deal with a person and his money or his or her goods. Get the idea here. God is incredibly interested in what we do with his money. It's his. And what we do with it is a revealer or a manifestation of who we love, who we worship, and really who we trust. Who we trust. And so, my friends, I hope you'll understand that against this grain of the stereotype of pastors always preaching about money, I hope you'd give me a space of mercy for these 4 weeks to understand our heart is not, our heart is, we want you to enjoy what Jesus intends you to enjoy with what he's given you. He's given it to you on purpose. He wants to do some dynamic and powerful things in your life. He wants to use you and what he's blessed and granted you and stewarded to you. He wants to use that in ways that you'll be humbled and recognize, he is a gracious, generous, caring, working Savior that can use something as immoral as money to use it in lives and in ways I could never have used it better than. And so that's my heart and desire for you. And I'll trust that you'll have that heart towards me as we speak about it for these 4 weeks, that we would recognize it's not about getting money. It's about understanding Jesus' outlook to help us with a resource we use every single day. So, as we come to Mark 12, you could find the parallel passage in Luke 21 as well. Jesus has given a scathing rebuke about the scribes. He's been teaching those who would hear that the scribes, the Pharisees, the religious leaders of that day, all they wanted money for was for their betterment, for them to look more prestigious, for them to have more to spend on themselves, for them to be seen as elite in their society or in their climate, or to be able to leverage as such. And he's told the people, be wary of those who constantly want money under the pretense of religion to better their own personal bank account and welfare. And friends, as we've gone through 2 Timothy and 1 Timothy on Sunday nights, those people are still around. Right? Yeah. There's still people under the guise and pretense of religion wanting you and I to give so that their personal wealth and account statuses can grow and their personal jets can be fueled. But the difference is between those who are true teachers of the gospel and those who are false. They want their own personal welfare and benefit. True teachers will do what we're attempting to do these 4 weeks and say, here is Jesus' desire for his money in your life to make an eternal impact in the lives of those around you. We're not the end-all, be-all recipients. It is a clearinghouse mentality for gospel funds to make an eternal impact. So Jesus has warned the people about those who were intentionally and maliciously taking advantage of those in their midst, particularly widows. And in our passage here, Jesus then utilizes a widow in the way she gives to teach his disciples a valuable lesson. And now you and I, thousands of years later, she will be our instructor today to teach us a valuable lesson about giving and to avoid mistake number 2. So Jesus here commends a widow's giving because she gives in faith, not in abundance or based upon her ability. And maybe if there's a simple way to say it today, a lesson we can take away to help us fight mistake number 2 in our heart, if we want to, in our hearts, give in a reasonable way that makes sense to us and fits the budget and all the things that we've read and seen about charitable contributions, maybe we need to balance and push back on this side of the scale with Jesus' truth here today. And here it is. When we give, Jesus values sacrifice over self-sufficiency. He values sacrifice over self-sufficiency. Join me as we walk through just these few brief 4 verses here, and let's let our hearts be examined by the Spirit and helped by Jesus as we consider how we give for the gospel. Here Jesus is. He's watching many people. It says there's crowds. It's around the time of Passover, and so it's swelled up there in Jerusalem in numbers. And Jesus is watching many people give various amounts. So imagine the scene. Jesus is there at the temple. He's sitting in what's called the court of the women. There are 13 what look like trumpets on the wall, each with little plaques above them, each designating what that benevolence fund will go towards. So if you put in this benevolence horn, it looks like a horn, but it's just kind of their offering box. And how is that going to be used? It's going to be used to help the poor. This one's going to be used for the temple grounds. This one's going to be used for, and on it goes. So there's these 13 different receptacles that can be given to. And so Jesus is sitting there watching. It says he beheld it. The idea is he is giving it his attention. Jesus is not just kind of looking around, people watching here and there. He is watching specifically these 13 boxes. He's watching the people walk up to these 13 boxes. He's watching what they do in light of these 13 boxes and what they give and how they give it. And so as he watches these 13 boxes and the people coming up, the passage tells us that rich people probably including Pharisees among them, are giving at these boxes. And as they come up to these boxes, they are giving, he says here, substantial amounts. Look at verse 41. He's sitting in the treasury, beholding how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much, is what Mark and Luke tell us. So they are telling us that Jesus is watching, and as he watches, there are people who come with different bags or maybe different denominational amounts. And at some level, we understand from Mark writing this, that it was discernible to those watching. Now, whether, again, that was because of the type of money they brought, and in our words, we'd think about a denomination, or whether it was the amount of money they brought. Maybe they brought multiple bags with them. Anybody intentionally watching would have the perspective Jesus had there. So think about it. Again, put yourself there. We're sitting next to Jesus. We're watching these 13 particular boxes, or these trumpets where people are giving their money, and we can either discern because they're breaking out, in our vernacular, $100 bills and dropping them in, or they have bags of money, bags of coins, and they're going along these 13. That bag's empty, hand me another one. Whatever's taking place, we're not exactly sure, but we know this. You can discern that rich people are there, and Mark tells us they're casting in much. And it had to have been impressive to watch, right? People offloading big sums of money there at the temple that day. But wait, as we would maybe be prone to be impressed by big denominational amounts or bag after bag being handed to people as they put them in these 13 different boxes, Jesus is going to flip the whole thing around. And he's going to do what he typically did with his disciples and helps us even today with, which is move us from our realm of viewing and thinking and seeing to his realm of viewing, thinking, and seeing. Moving us away from how we would tend to evaluate and make decisions to how he calls us to evaluate and therefore make faith-based decisions. All these rich people, and it's not a condemnation against being rich, all these rich people come, they're casting in much, but Jesus describes the underlying motivation of what they gave and why they gave. He's watching these giving boxes. Crowds are giving. They're giving much. Maybe they're there in their nice apparel and they're walking by being a blessing to these boxes in the eyes of man. But how does Jesus describe their giving? Look at verse 44. He's talking about the rich. They cast in out of their, everybody say the word, abundance. Their abundance. So the disciples maybe are wowed. We don't know. Or we would maybe be prone and tempted to be wowed because of the big denominational amounts or the big amounts of money, just the sheer quantity going into these. I mean, they're probably having to get emptied. I mean, it's serious. It's impressive to say the least. These rich people are giving big amounts, but Jesus tells us the motivation behind it and the thought process. That they're giving out of their abundance. In other words, it's sensible to them according to their way of thinking. What I'm putting in today makes sense. When they evaluated their finances, it was reasonable to say this was a good amount, it was a significant amount, it was enough of an amount to bring to the temple of God that day, as Israelites should do. And so somebody would maybe be tempted to say, well, why is that so bad then? I mean, they still gave. Why is Jesus even dissecting and discerning what's going on with them when they still gave? They were still obedient at some level, weren't they? The issue isn't that they were giving necessarily. The bigger issue that Jesus was addressing was the heart motivation, not just the exterior action. And his concern is that their issue in their giving is that they're not having to rely upon God for his provision, or give in a way that would change their living, give in a way that would call them to sacrifice. So let's stop and help ourselves for a second. Let's remember money is relative. You say, what do you mean, Pastor? I mean, just because somebody has a lot of money and gives in your mind or my mind a substantial amount of money doesn't necessarily mean it was a lot of money for them. No? Nobody's with me? So, if I make $300,000 a year, I don't. If I make $300,000, Pastor said he makes $300,000, he's preaching about money. No. If I made $300,000 a year and I dropped in annually at the church $30,000, some people would be tempted to go, ooh, that's more than I made my first year out of college. Ooh. But it's no more impressive than my 7-year-old daughter getting $100 for her birthday and doing what? Putting in $10. Woo, that's like a milkshake, you know? Let's remember that. But we're prone, if we're not careful, to be impressed and wowed by rich people casting in much, if you would say it that way. Let's remember here, Jesus is not condemning necessarily that they gave. He's questioning, wanting us to question, wanting us to consider that you and I don't need to give in what we'd call a sensible manner that requires no faith. We, as followers of God, have been freed from covetousness. We, as followers of God, have been freed from the need to love money, to live for money, to seek to store up and lay up that money here on earth. We are called to do what? Give sacrificially in a way that would call us to rely upon Him. But here the rich were casting in out of their abundance. Do you think this was what Jesus wanted? That, oh, I've got this much money. Yeah, I can afford to just throw that in. I mean, it's big to all these other people, but for me, it's just a light thing. I've got a ton. I'll put in this large amount. And it was. Jesus isn't saying it wasn't a large amount. But they were giving with a motivation or a mindset out of abundance. And it causes us, because of Jesus' own words, to ask, is this what Jesus wants? People who give in a calculated manner. People who know what they can afford to give. People that know it won't strain them if they give it. People who won't necessarily be bothered or have to change any of their lifestyle or plans if they give this amount. Does He want people giving based on what somebody has said is the appropriate amount in your budget? Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, etc. Does He want givers that are considering paying off their car sooner if they give only this amount to the gospel? Or does He want people who give, if we could say it this way, circumstantially? No doubt there were others that day that could have given by faith, but maybe they were fearful. Maybe the rich could have put in even more, but because they're living under Roman occupation and because taxation fluctuated regularly because of perversion and injustice, maybe they stepped back and said, well, things aren't all the way as secure as I'd like them to be, so I could give more, but I can give this right now because I'm comfortable here right now based on what's going on with my circumstances in my life and around my life. After all, I have to think of the future. And Jesus doesn't forbid good stewardship. But He calls us away from calculated circumstantial giving to give by faith, not to give based on human estimation. To give in a way that affects us, not in a way that just is easy or light to us. One author said this way, if you give what you don't need, it isn't really giving. Have you ever gone through your kid's room or grandkid's room with them, trying to declutter? We'll keep it in that realm so it doesn't get too close to home and personal, right? You start going through their room, and it's just like toys have just multiplied like rabbits, right? I mean, it's like, where did all these come from? Oh, hey, we're going to pare down. I want you to get a trash bag so we can collect to go to Salvation Army. So do you want to get rid of this one? Oh, no. It's my favorite. Okay, you can keep that one. What about these 17 over here? No, I'm good. These 17? Yeah. What about these 3 trash bags I filled? No, I'm good. You can get rid of them. Yeah, they're giving them away. Is it really a sacrifice to them? Just give away 17 of their stuffed bears, that they don't care about and haven't played with for 4 years? Is it really a sacrifice? Well, they're still giving. They are, but where's the heart and the motive, right? Jesus here is addressing that very issue, which I think is why we see only one giver this day. Out of the crowds, he commended one giver alone. And it wasn't because of her position in the economy that she held, a powerful sway there, or that she had some government tie he could use for his advantage. He points out this widow woman who apparently had very little to nothing. She didn't have some big estate. She didn't even put in the most money, monetarily speaking, that day. As she approaches the box, she drops in what our text here calls 2 mites. The mite was the smallest coin they had for her to be able to utilize. To try to maybe put it in perspective of just how much value these 2 coins had, it's a rough equivalent to this. She gave the amount of about 5 to 11 minutes of work for a common day's labor in their time. Everybody catch that? The most she could give that day was the equivalent of 5 to 11 minutes of a day laborer's paycheck in that time. Maybe translate that for ourselves. Somebody who's maybe flipping burgers at the McDonald's, getting 5 to 11 minutes of that paycheck. How many are excited about that amount of money right now? I don't know what that would be, but it wouldn't be a lot, would it? And so in man's mind, we don't really think, wow, there's a ton of value there. But of all the gifts given that day at the temple, hers being no doubt the least perhaps in denomination or amount, something that really didn't equal a lot in God or in man's economy or man's thoughts or even in an afterthought, that gift Jesus takes and makes a paradoxical statement that turns the whole equation on its head for his followers then and now to consider. What does he say there in verse 43? Verily I say unto you that this poor widow has cast more in than all they. Is that, everybody got that? Than all they that cast into the treasury. I want you to flip this in your mind for a second. Mark and Luke both record and say that this widow, in Jesus' estimation, gave more than everyone else that day. She was the big giver. Remember the 13 trumpet chest? Remember the rich coming in with big denominations or big quantities? Casting in much. It was discernible, it was seeable, it was noticeable. And Jesus says, as much as they put in, the crowds, this woman right here with her 5 to 11 minutes of day laborer's wage offering have cast in more than everybody else altogether. This is total presupposition or conjecture. But how many people that day probably didn't even know there was a widow who had given anything that day? I mean, the rich have been going by putting in their money, right? And that's been noticeable and discernible at some level. But here comes this lady in their midst, drops in next to nothing, and walks on her way. She didn't even have 13 coins to go to 13 boxes. And yet Jesus says, I'm telling you right now, she gave more than everybody else combined. She was trusting God for her provision, and therefore she gave in a way that was sacrificial. Jesus even says as such that it required her entire substance of her living. She'd have to rely upon the care of her God that she was giving back to for his purposes and her needs in her life. Friends, she comes with an inconsequential gift to man, but it arrested and warranted the Lord's attention. So much so that it's recorded in 2 Gospels, and you and I, 2,000 years later, continue to be instructed by her 5 to 10 minute offering. Today, young people, today, a woman, your senior, thousands of years ago, is somebody Jesus wants you to figure out something about your life and your future finances from. Those of us in the room who have grown as adults and grown, therefore, in financial stewardship, and maybe you have a house, a car, maybe you have a vacation house, maybe you have more than one car, maybe you have a very healthy 401k or whatever it is your structures are in, and maybe you had even some financial success this week with some trades or whatever it might be. Though you may have a wealth management person in your life, Jesus wants you to add her to your life too. And her instruction to your example of giving, he says to us, she gave more than everybody. Like the way C.S. Lewis reminded us about giving. Because often we're prone to give in a calculated or circumstantial manner rather than a sacrificial manner. We want to give in a self-reliant manner than a God-reliant manner. And sometimes we get to quibbling about, well, how much do you want then, Pastor? 12.5%? Do you want 15%? Do you want 17.9%, Pastor? When's it enough? When's it enough? When's it enough? How much should I give? Well, I can't answer the question percentage-wise for you of how much you can give or should give. But I think C.S. Lewis helps us where he says this: I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. Isn't that what the widow did for us? She gave in a way that caused her to rely on God and have sacrifice in her life. I worry that sometimes we feel we're free to give as little as possible or give as we feel led because we don't want to get into legalism of any sorts. But Jesus and the apostles taught very clearly that proportional, sacrificial, generous giving is the natural outflow of a heart that loves Jesus and values eternity and wants to see other people there with them. He talked about it here in our passage. Paul talked about it to the Corinthians. Paul talked about it to the Philippians. He'd talk about it. Jesus, Paul, and others talked about it matters what we do with the money he's given us because it is directly tied to how we're doing spiritually, week 1. But then who are we going to rely on as we talk about that today? You say, is this really a big issue then, you think? Are you saying that this is a problem that even Faith Baptist Church could learn from, and this is a problem that even Faith Baptist Church has? I want you to consider this. All these different polls, all these different studies out there, but here's a startling reality. Depending on which study you read, professing Christians that attend church regularly, of those, nationally 5% give 10% of their income to the church. But here's a scary reality. Of the rest, of the 95% that say I am a follower of Jesus Christ, they give approximately 2.5% of their income for the gospel. Now, I want you to step back and think about that, would you? I get statistics, polls, they're only as good as who's been asked. But I have had the privilege of being a Christian over 20 years, and every church is underwhelmingly receiving less funds than those who come and have jobs. Now you're getting a little personal, Pastor. Well, let me get more personal. If you and I each just simply committed with the giving units, those who are members here, those who are giving members here, those who say, I'm a member, I have a job, if all we gave was a baseline of 10%, we've talked through it before, we've deduced that we in our budget would be about 2/3 higher than we are now. Everybody catch that? You were at our budget meeting in January perhaps or in December. We had an annual take-in last year of gospel funds of over $600,000, $700,000. Get the idea. If all the giving units just gave a level of 10%, based on calculations, we figured out we'd be at like $1.5 million. Are you upset about that? I'm not angry, but it does sadden me. It calls me to consider how am I giving graciously, sacrificially, and generously for the gospel. It also shows me that we need to grow in faith about this matter. That maybe we need to move away from what I would call reasonable giving or circumstantial giving and get involved in, God, I need your grace to give this amount, to deny myself. God, I need to go forward in my faith. God, I will rely upon you. My friends, we have the opportunity, not just in our church, but in churches across America, to send more money to foreign missions and get all these unreached people groups we hear about all the time, right? The 1040 window. Man, how can't we get more people there? How can we get more funds there? How can we get the gospel there? Look to your left and right. And then point the fingers right here. And that's the answer. I'm in college, Pastor. I make after taxes, an embarrassing amount of money. I make literally, Pastor, $300 a week. It is so humiliating and embarrassing how little I make. And my debt is rising. I don't want to sound insensitive to that. But you know when the time is to give sacrificially and generously? Now. Whew, Pastor, I hear you, but I'm newly married. You've been there before, Pastor. You know what it's like. You can barely rub 2 nickels together. It's a hot date when you get to go and split a McChicken. I mean, we are poor, Pastor. Okay, I hear you. But let me tell you when the time to start giving by God's grace is. Right now. Oh, man, I only get an allowance of $37 a week from my parents, Pastor. It's embarrassing. I would love to have had that, number one. Number two, it's time to give graciously and sacrificially right now. Pastor, I'm on fixed income now. I'm retired. I'm on social. Guess when the time to give graciously and sacrificially is? Right now. Because we're all on fixed income. Your paycheck is fixed unless you're on commission sales, and then it's still going to be fixed when you get those commissions in. It's time to give graciously and sacrificially now. No matter what stage of life you're at, no matter what age you are in life, take the widow's example. Jesus commended one person out of the crowds that day that gave significant monetary amounts, both in denomination or in quantity. And it was wow, and it was impressive, and it filled those shofar trumpets up. One lady gave 5 to 10 minutes worth of money of a day laborer, and Jesus said, whoop, wait a minute. There's one person you need to learn from today. Only one. Her. Because she gave out of need, not out of abundance. So let me close this morning's message with a few practical, proactive steps for us. If I find myself today, Pastor, in the mistake of giving in a reasonable to mankind manner, how do I change that? How do I fix that? Well, today, the first crowd I would address would be this. If you say you're a follower of Jesus Christ, but you're not giving regularly to your church for the gospel to go forward, understand that Jesus, He's freed you from fear. He's freed you from selfishness. He has freed you from covetousness. And as such, he exampled, taught, and his early followers demonstrated that financial giving is an expression of our faith in him. In fact, friends, we show our trust in him as our provider, and we prioritize eternal matters by giving for the gospel to go forward through our local church and beyond. Those funds that we receive here at Faith Baptist Church, they're used to facilitate our gospel ministries here going forward, but then they go through us to church planners, to those who are revitalizing churches, to those who are missionaries going to a country, or to supporting a national pastor already in that country with that family so that they continue the gospel ministry there. God desires you today to get on board in regards to giving. So if you're not giving today, young to old alike, start today. This journey of faith that awaits you is accompanied by the grace of God, and he will guide you, he will build you, he will show himself mighty on your behalf, but you need to start today. Not when circumstances are better, and not when it makes more sense with your financial plan, but today, my friends, the day that we make that decision. For others, perhaps you're giving. And I want to say I commend you for expressing a level of faith and obedience. But based upon this passage, I think I have to ask, would Jesus commend your giving? Now, that's a dangerous one, right? Would Jesus commend your giving? Because if we say yes, it almost sounds arrogant and prideful. If we say no, it feels like it's a never-ending scale. I get that. But in your heart right now, in your conscience, I think each of us know if we're giving in a manner that's reasonable, in a manner that just is out of abundance, in a manner that doesn't end up affecting me that much. Maybe I could flip the question around. Does your gospel giving dictate what type of house you're able to afford? Does your gospel giving dictate what kind of car you're able to drive, or how much you're even able to spend on your grocery budget this week? Or does our gospel giving look more like what's left over after we've paid on our student loans? What's left over as we've tried to pay down our credit card debt? What's left over after we've maxed out our retirement contributions, or paid for our kids' sporting events for the year, or paid for one of our kids to get braces this year, or we've saved up enough for our family vacation this year? Now I can give, or now I'll give what's left over. Please don't misunderstand me here. Giving to the gospel does include good stewardship. That could include any of the above. You could still save for family vacation. You could still get the braces for your kids. You could still fill in the blank. We're not saying that that's forbidden by Jesus at all. What we are saying is that none of those things that I've mentioned or anything else should be at the expense of giving sacrificially to the gospel. Listen, friends, Jesus wants us to give in a manner that calls us to grace, that demands his help in our life for the gospel to go forward. So last people group, maybe you're here today and in your conscience, you know you're giving in a way that is sacrificial. You've swam out, if we could say it that way, further into those waters of faith that require God to sustain you as you seek his grace to give as much as possible rather than vice versa. My encouragement to you today is this: continue on. Know it's worth it because you're going off of Jesus' values, not our values of what's reasonable and rational. We will not lay up for that in eternity, that which we then have a regret when we get there. We'll get there, we'll understand it as clear as Jesus wants us to right now and more, and see it was worth it. But in that, let's also realize what the devil desires. As we grow in grace and we give sacrificially, Let each of us guard our hearts against what the devil wants, which is for us to elevate our heart in pride, thinking somehow we're superior now because of this. All we are obedient, thankful servants, utilizing what He stewarded into our hands to go forward for His desire and eternal purposes. We are in faith saying, I agree with your value system rather than my value system, an eternal perspective rather than a temporal perspective, and I will go forward with you, and it's because of your grace it even gets done. So my friends, today, may we remember that Jesus, more than the treasurer, more than your wife or husband, more than anybody at church, more than anybody in your community, Jesus takes note of what we give. And He wants you and I to go forward in the grace of God, enjoying the liberty we have in Him to give sacrificially. George Mueller said it like this: God judges what we give by what we keep. And so, my friends, today, as we think about mistake number 2 Jesus is trying to keep us from, let's not give in a way that's reasonable. Let's give in a way that is sacrificial. A way that moves us away from self-sufficiency and circumstances and what we understand and our estimations and what's just sensible, and move into a realm that says, God, I need your grace to fight my flesh in this matter. God, I need your grace to understand this is for eternity. God, I want to give in a way that is generous and changes the way I would live for me, and this be used for you. So today, my friends, I don't know where you find yourself in the regard of giving. I don't know if you're not giving. I don't know if you're giving consistently but could grow with grace and sacrifice. I don't know if at this point in your life you feel you are giving graciously and sacrificially. But I do know today that Jesus commended one person for you and I to learn from and not fall into the mistake of everyone in abundance, but give in a way that says, I need you, God, to provide, to help, and to get the glory. So today, my friend, let's grow in this issue of giving. We're going to give you a moment. We're going to stand in a moment with our heads bowed, and I want to give you a moment to, with God's help, make a decision of faith about this matter. You might be here today as a non-giver, and God's convicted and pricked your heart, young to old alike, and you need to change that today. Take that step today. You maybe need to say, I'm going to move from being a line item, makes sense, rational, sensible, Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey approved number to that which pushes me to sacrifice. God, help me today. And all of us saying, God, protect me from thinking I'm something special by yielding myself to what you've stated is true. I need your grace to guard me from the sin of pride and presumption. So would you do this? Would you stand with me this morning? Our heads are bowed because we want to give you an opportunity to respond and be able to meditate there privately. And as our heads are bowed and the piano is going to play this morning, I'm calling you as a follower of Christ to consider this issue of giving sacrificially versus reasonably. So our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. We want to give you this moment to respond. If you'd like to pray in your seat or you'd like to come up and pray here up front, you're welcome to do so. But with our heads bowed this morning, let's take a time of privacy for that. If you're here today and you say, I have questions about Jesus, you've talked about him today, about him wanting to change my heart and him being able to forgive me and him even being able to free to where I'd even want to be a giver. I mean, this just sounds so different. Everything about him is different than what I currently understand or recognize. Well, today, my friends, if you want to know more about Jesus, you today want to know more about what he is able to do in your life, how he loves you, how he wants a relationship with you, how he can forgive and change your life and your eternity, we're going to encourage you to walk out to where you came in at the foyer there. There are people ready to help you there today, answer the questions you have. So as the piano plays this morning, let's have our hearts yielded to what he wants to do.
Grace is Jesus, my Redeemer. There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my joy, my righteousness and freedom, my steadfast love, my deep and boundless peace. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus, for my life is wholly bound to His. Oh, how strange and divine, I can sing, whole is mine, yet not I, but through Christ in me. The night is dark, but I am not forsaken, for by my side the Savior, He will stay. I labor on in weakness and rejoicing, for in my need His power is displayed. To this I hold, my shepherd will defend me. Through the deepest valley He will lead. Oh, the night has been won, and I shall overcome, yet not I, but through Christ in me.
That concludes our formal invitation, but if there's anything I can do for you today, any questions you have or you'd like to talk about, let me know, all right? I'll be out there in the foyer, be glad to set up a time with you, be a help to you in whatever way we can. I'm going to ask everybody to be seated except for our ushers, and then for Paul and Pat Thacker to come this way. Paul and Pat have followed the Lord in faith many years ago, have known the Lord for several decades, following Him, serving Him. They both have followed Lord and believers' baptism. They have both completed membership class here at Faith Baptist Church and will be transferring from a church of like faith and practice. And so all those glad to welcome Paul and Pat into membership this morning. Let it be known by just verbalizing amen. Amen. We're so glad for that. Paul and Pat, if you wouldn't mind going to the foyer so people can get by and see you there. And what I want to encourage you to do is after service this morning, go by, say hi to them, introduce yourself. You do your best to remember their names. They won't remember yours for sure because that's just a numbers issue, right? So be in prayer for Paul and Pat as they have joined here and as they go forward and growing here with us at Faith Baptist Church. And again, if you're here today and we can be a help with anything, we want to be. I'm going to invite Brother Derek to give announcements and then do the offering this morning.
Thank you, Pastor. Just a quick announcement. If you are interested in the Israel trip, maybe you've been to the interest meeting, maybe you've just been on the outside looking in and seeing what's going on there, there is still time for you to be a part of that. Send a text, email Pastor, let him know so we can get your spot finalized for that and you can begin the process of getting the money in for that trip. It is going to be an exciting trip, seeing the Holy Land, experiencing all of the different biblical accounts that you can over there. It's going to be a life-changing trip for sure. Next Sunday, following the morning service, for all of those with parents who are juniors who are planning to go to camp, as well as parents of teens who are planning on going to camp this summer, we will have a very brief meeting following the morning service in the teen room. It'll give you critical information that you need about camp, as well as finalizing the spots for camp so we can get that information to the camp and make sure that there is a bunk spot for them for sure. On Sunday, March the 8th, is going to be an incredible fundraising event for the juniors and teens of Faith Baptist Church in order to provide some of that and ease that financial burden of getting to camp. We will have a bake auction in the lobby following that morning service. It is going to be the Pat Brandon Memorial Bake Auction. This is going to be a fantastic event. The teens and the juniors are making the baked goods. They're going to be fantastic. They're going to taste amazing because they're made with the love that comes from children's hearts, and that is the best ingredient for sure. So you're going to want to make sure you're there and purchase some of those baked goods. And then following the auction, there's going to be a donut eating contest that is going to be quite exciting. We have some incredible teams lined up for that event. One team is Pastor Paul and his daughter Nina which is going to be a strong team for sure. And then we are going to have Chris Sears and Nate Steeman. If you guys could stand, they're going to be one of the teams. Okay, don't stand. It's okay. They're going to be a team. Maybe not the most exciting team, but they are going to provide a powerful punch as well. We're going to have a team of Libby Carr and Jocelyn Glover, a young team, but sure to give the others a run for their money. And then we have Amanda Carr and Kara Worthen. That team, for sure, going to be up there along with the finalists and in there to win it. And the last team is Grant Steeman and Jared Worthen. So one thing that we are looking for, that you can be a part of that donut eating contest as well without having to shove donut holes into your mouth and down your throat, is we are looking for people that would sponsor those teams and encourage them in their process of seeking the 50 donut holes down. It is going to be a challenging thing. So in the lobby on one of the tables, there is a form you can fill out, sign up with your name on one of those donation levels to partner with those teams as they seek to win the amazing winning gift. It's going to be crazy cool. You're going to see it. Make sure you're there Sunday, March the 8th, following the morning service. You aren't going to want to miss it. We'll pray and we will take our morning offering. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for the time that we could have to come together as believers and encouraging each other in songs as we sang this morning and worship to you. Thankful for the word that you had for us from your scripture. Pray that each and every one of us would evaluate in our minds how we are giving to your cause. Are we giving out of sacrifice? Are we pursuing to live out the gospel financially by giving above and beyond what we think we may be able to in order to extend the reach of the gospel to those in our immediate area and also around the world? We ask all these things in your Son's holy name. Amen.
Again, thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions about anything you've seen, please visit guest services in the lobby or connect with us at includefaith.org or find us on social media. Be sure to join us back here tonight for our all-generation service at 6 p.m.